In a small, quiet town where life moved at its own unhurried pace, the local diner on Main Street was more than just a place to grab a meal. It was a hub of activity, a spot where people gathered to share stories, laughter, and sometimes even secrets. The diner had been around for decades, its red vinyl booth slightly worn but still comfortable, its walls adorned with faded black and white photographs of the town's history. On any given day, you could find farmers in dusty boots chatting, with teachers clutching their lunch bags, all united by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon. One sunny afternoon, as golden rays streamed through the large windows, casting warm patterns on the tiled floor, Maya stepped inside. She was a striking woman with an air of quiet confidence that drew attention without her even trying. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she wore a simple yet elegant dress that suited her perfectly. As she entered, the bell above the door jingled softly, announcing her arrival. A few heads turned briefly, but most patrons were too engrossed in their conversations or meals to pay much notice. Maya scanned the room and chose a booth near the window, where she could watch the world go by while sipping her favorite iced tea. Unbeknownst to Maya, trouble was already brewing in the corner of the diner. Officer Greg Harris sat perched on a stool at the counter, his uniform crisp but his demeanor anything but welcoming. Harris was a man who thrived on authority, or at least the illusion of it. He carried himself with an exaggerated sense of importance, his chest puffed out like a peacock displaying its feathers. Known throughout the town for his abrasive attitude and prejudiced behavior, Harris often made life difficult for those he deemed beneath him. Whether it was giving unnecessary tickets to teenagers or making snide remarks to shopkeepers, his actions left a sour taste in many mouths. Yet, because of his position, few dared to challenge him directly. As Harris waited, impatiently for his coffee, he drummed his fingers against the countertop, his irritation growing with each passing second. When the waitress, a young woman named Lisa, finally approached with his steaming mug, he didn't bother thanking her. Instead, he grabbed it roughly and muttered under his breath, "Guess they can't get anything right around here." His voice carried just enough for nearby diners to hear, though no one met his gaze. Lisa forced a polite smile before retreating quickly, eager to escape his presence. Feeling restless, Harris swiveled on his stool, letting his eyes roam lazily across the room. That's when he spotted Maya sitting alone in her booth. His lips curled into a sneer almost instinctively. To him, Maya represented everything he disliked, someone who appeared calm, collected, and unbothered by his attempts to assert dominance. Without hesitation, Harris slid off his stool and strode over to her table, his boots clicking against the floor with every step. The sound caused several heads to turn, curiosity mingling with apprehension in the air. "Hey there," Harris said loudly as he loomed over Maya's table, his arms crossed over his chest. His tone was mocking, dripping with condescension. "What brings you to this fine establishment?" Maya looked up from the menu she'd been studying, her expression calm despite the sudden intrusion. She recognized Harris immediately. Rumors about his behavior had reached her ears long ago. Still, she wasn't about to let him rattle her. "Just grabbing some lunch," she replied evenly, her voice steady and polite. Harris chuckled, clearly amused by her composure. "Well, maybe next time you should think twice about where you eat," he suggested, his smirk widening. "This is a respectable place after all. Not everyone fits in here." The words hung heavy in the air, sharp and cutting. Maya felt a flicker of anger ignite within her, but she pushed it down, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Instead, she simply nodded and said, "I'll keep that in mind." The tension in the room was palpable now. Other diners exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others pretended to focus intently on their plates. Harris, however, seemed oblivious to the discomfort he was causing. Leaning closer to Maya, he added, "You never know who might be watching. Best to stick to your own kind, don't you think?" Maya's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you for your concern," she said coolly, her tone laced with sarcasm. "But I'm sure I'll manage just fine." Harris straightened up, clearly enjoying the exchange. "Suit yourself," he shrugged, flashing another smug grin before turning on his heel and heading back to the counter. The moment he walked away, the atmosphere in the diner began to ease slightly, though the lingering tension remained. Once Harris was out of earshot, Maya exhaled deeply, releasing the breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She glanced around the room, noticing the sympathetic looks from a few patrons. One elderly man gave her a small nod as if silently acknowledging her strength. Another woman mouthed, "Are you okay?" from across the room. Maya offered them a faint smile, grateful for their support, even if it was unspoken. Though outwardly composed, Maya couldn't shake the anger simmering beneath the surface. She had done nothing wrong, yet Harris had singled her out simply because of the color of her skin. It wasn't the first time she'd faced such prejudice, but it stung nonetheless. Determined not to let him ruin her day, she signaled for the waitress to bring her check. As she paid and prepared to leave, Maya reminded herself of something important. She was stronger than this, and deep down, she knew that karma had a way of balancing the scales eventually. Little did she, or anyone else in the diner, know that fate was already setting the stage for justice to be served. Because what Harris failed to realize in his arrogance and ignorance was that Maya wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was someone special, someone connected to power in ways he couldn't begin to imagine. And soon enough, his actions would come back to haunt him in ways he'd never anticipated. Maya stepped out of the diner, her heels clicking softly against the pavement as she walked toward her car. The warm afternoon sun bathed the streets in golden light, but it did little to lift her spirits. Harris's words still echoed in her mind, sharp and unrelenting. Though she had managed to remain calm during their encounter, the weight of his prejudice pressed heavily on her chest. She gripped the steering wheel tightly as she sat inside her car, taking a moment to collect herself before driving home. When Maya arrived at her house, a cozy two-story brick home with flower boxes lining the windows, she found Marcus in the kitchen. He was standing by the counter, chopping vegetables for dinner. Marcus was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a commanding presence that matched his kind heart. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his warm brown eyes sparkled whenever he smiled. Today, however, his expression turned serious the moment he saw Maya's face. "Hey," he said, setting down the knife and wiping his hands on a dish towel. "You okay? You look like something's bothering you." Maya hesitated for a second, debating whether to tell him what happened. They had been married for nearly 10 years, and Marcus always had a way of making her feel safe and supported. Still, she hated burdening him with negativity, especially when he worked so hard to provide for their family. "It's nothing major," Maya began cautiously, slipping off her jacket and hanging it on the back of a chair. "But I ran into Officer Harris at the diner today." Marcus's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Harris? What did he want?" Maya sighed, leaning against the counter. "He didn't want anything. He just decided to make some comments about me being there. Told me I should stick to my own kind." Her voice remained steady, but the frustration behind her words was unmistakable. Marcus's jaw tightened as he absorbed her story. "That son of a—" He stopped himself, exhaling sharply through his nose. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Are you all right?" Maya nodded quickly. "I'm fine. Honestly, I've dealt with worse, but Marcus—" She paused, looking at him intently. "Why does he think he can talk to people like that? Like we're less than human?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms over his chest. Harris had always been a problem in the community, known for his abrasive behavior and blatant disrespect toward certain groups of people. For years, complaints about him had piled up, but nothing ever seemed to change. The department shrugged it off, chalking it up to Harris's old-school mentality. To them, he was just another difficult officer who got results, even if those results came at the expense of decency and fairness. "What bothers me most," Marcus continued after a long silence, "is that guys like Harris never seem to face consequences. They act like they're untouchable because they wear a badge." His tone was measured, but there was an edge to it that Maya recognized immediately. It was the same tone he used whenever he talked about injustice or inequality, the issues he had dedicated his career to fighting against. Maya placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Don't worry about it," she said softly. "It's done now. I handled it. Let's not let someone like him ruin our evening." Marcus looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "You're right," he admitted. "But Maya, this isn't just about you, it's about everyone he's treated this way, and I won't stand for it anymore." As they prepared dinner together, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Harris looming over Maya in the diner. Every time he thought about it, his blood boiled. He knew firsthand how damaging unchecked power could be, especially in law enforcement. Growing up in a working-class neighborhood, Marcus had seen plenty of officers abuse their authority, targeting those who couldn't fight back. That's why he had joined the police force in the first place, to make a difference, to protect people instead of harming them. Over the years, he had risen through the ranks, earning respect and trust from colleagues and citizens alike. Now, as the newly appointed police commissioner, a role he hadn't even told Maya about yet, he finally had the power to enact real change. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, determined to address the issue head-on. Before leaving for work, he kissed Maya goodbye and promised her that everything would be okay. As he drove to the precinct, his mind raced with ideas. How could he hold Harris accountable without causing unnecessary drama? More importantly, how could he send a message to the entire department that such behavior wouldn't be tolerated under his leadership? When Marcus arrived at the precinct, the parking lot was already buzzing with activity. Officers milled about, chatting casually or rushing to their patrol cars. Inside, the atmosphere felt tense yet routine. Everyone knew change was coming. Rumors of Marcus's appointment had spread like wildfire. Some officers welcomed the news, eager to see reforms implemented. Others, like Harris, viewed Marcus's promotion with suspicion, fearing stricter rules and closer scrutiny. Marcus made his way to the briefing room, where a group of officers awaited his arrival. Standing at the front of the room, he surveyed the faces before him. Some looked curious, others wary. Clearing his throat, Marcus began speaking in a firm but respectful tone. "Good morning, everyone. First, let me say how honored I am to serve as your new commissioner. Together, we have an opportunity to strengthen the bond between our department and the community. But to do that, we need to lead by example. We are here to protect and serve, not to intimidate or divide." His words hung in the air, met with nods of agreement from some and uneasy glances from others. When Marcus finished his speech, he asked for questions. Predictably, Harris raised his hand, though his expression betrayed his reluctance. "Commissioner Johnson," he started, his tone dripping with false politeness. "How exactly do you plan to enforce these changes?" Marcus locked eyes with him, his gaze unwavering. "By holding everyone accountable," he replied simply, "including myself." Later that day, Marcus requested Harris's personnel file from HR. Flipping through the pages, he discovered a troubling pattern. Multiple complaints from citizens alleging verbal abuse, racial profiling, and excessive force. Each complaint had been dismissed or ignored, often with vague explanations like lack of evidence or misunderstanding. Marcus clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just negligence, it was complicity. Determined to gather more information, Marcus decided to visit the diner himself. If Harris truly believed he was untouchable, Marcus wanted to witness his behavior firsthand. Dressed in plain clothes to avoid drawing attention, he entered the diner late in the afternoon. The smell of fried chicken and fresh coffee greeted him as he took a seat near the window. From his vantage point, he could observe Harris clearly. Sure enough, the officer sat slouched at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee, while glaring at anyone who dared glance his way. As Marcus watched, Harris spotted a young Hispanic couple seated nearby. Without provocation, he approached their table, towering over them menacingly. "What are you two doing here?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to draw stares. The couple exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. "We're just having lunch," the man stammered. Harris sneered, shaking his head. "This isn't your neighborhood. Maybe try somewhere else next time." Marcus's stomach churned with disgust. Watching Harris bully innocent people confirmed everything he suspected, and more. Quietly, he pulled out his phone and snapped a few photos, documenting the interaction for future reference. When Harris returned to the counter, Marcus slipped out of the diner unnoticed, his resolve stronger than ever. Back at the precinct, Marcus called Harris into his office. The officer sauntered in confidently, clearly expecting a casual chat. But the moment he saw the stern look on Marcus's face, his bravado faltered. "Have a seat," Marcus instructed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Harris obeyed, reluctantly, fidgeting nervously as Marcus opened a folder containing his disciplinary record. "Officer Harris," Marcus began, his tone icy. "Do you recognize these documents?" Harris glanced at the papers briefly before nodding. "Yeah, I've seen them before." "So what?" Marcus leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto Harris. "So what? These are formal complaints filed against you by members of our community. Complaints that were conveniently swept under the rug. Not anymore." Harris shifted uncomfortably in his seat, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Look, Commissioner," he tried to explain, "sometimes you gotta be tough to keep order. People don't understand why—" "I understand perfectly," Marcus interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "I understand that you've been using your badge as a weapon instead of a shield. That ends today. Effective immediately, you will undergo sensitivity training and regular performance reviews. Any further incidents will result in suspension or termination." Harris opened his mouth to protest, but no words came out. Defeated, he muttered a quiet, "Yes, sir," before shuffling out of the office. As the door clicked shut behind him, Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. It wasn't easy confronting someone like Harris, but it was necessary. Justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about preventing it from happening again. That evening, Marcus shared the day's events with Maya over dinner. Her eyes widened in surprise as he recounted the conversation with Harris. "Do you think it'll make a difference?" she asked cautiously. "Marcus." The next morning, Marcus woke up earlier than usual. The events of the previous day weighed heavily on his mind, but instead of feeling drained, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He'd spent years working his way up through the ranks, learning how to navigate the complexities of law enforcement while staying true to his values. Now, as commissioner, he finally had the authority to make meaningful changes that could protect people like Maya from officers like Harris. As sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, Marcus glanced at his wife sleeping peacefully beside him. Her calm demeanor masked the strength and resilience she carried within, qualities he admired deeply. Determined not to let her, or anyone. "Elsie?" Down, Marcus quietly slipped out of bed, dressed, and headed to the kitchen. Over a steaming cup of coffee, Marcus reviewed the notes he had jotted down the night before. His plan was clear. Tackle systemic issues within the department, starting with accountability. Officers needed to understand that their actions had consequences, whether positive or negative. Sensitivity training would be mandatory for all personnel, with additional programs designed to address implicit bias and cultural awareness. But beyond policies and procedures, Marcus wanted to foster a culture of respect, one where citizens felt safe approaching officers without fear of judgment or mistreatment. It wouldn't happen overnight, but every step forward mattered. He drove to the precinct. Marcus reflected on the challenges ahead. Change often stirred resistance, especially in environments resistant to disruption. Some officers might view his reforms as unnecessary interference, while others might see them as an attack on tradition, but Marcus knew better. Tradition wasn't sacred if it perpetuated harm. Protecting innocent lives took precedence over preserving outdated practices. With this mindset, he parked his car and entered the building, ready to face whatever obstacles lay ahead. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere buzzed with activity. Officers bustled about, some reviewing case files, others preparing for patrols. When word spread that Commissioner Johnson was holding another meeting, murmurs rippled through the room. Speculation ran rampant. Was he going to reassign shifts? Implement new protocols? Fire underperforming officers? No one knew for sure, but everyone braced themselves for what was coming. Marcus called the meeting to order promptly at 9 a.m., standing at the front of the briefing room with an air of quiet confidence. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "Yesterday I spoke about leading by example and strengthening trust between our department and the community. Today I want to outline specific steps we'll take to achieve that goal." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "First, every officer will undergo sensitivity training. This isn't optional, it's essential. Second, we're launching a citizen advisory board to provide feedback and hold us accountable. And third, any misconduct will be addressed swiftly and transparently." A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd. Some officers nodded approvingly, recognizing the importance of reform, while others exchanged skeptical glances. Among them was Harris, who sat stiffly in the back row, arms crossed over his chest. His expression was unreadable, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his displeasure. Marcus noticed but didn't call him out. Instead, he focused on delivering his message with clarity and conviction. After the meeting ended, Marcus returned to his office to finalize plans for implementing the new initiatives. He spent hours poring over documents, drafting memos, and coordinating with HR to schedule training sessions. By mid-afternoon, fatigue began creeping in, but Marcus pushed through, fueled by determination. Just as he was finishing up, there was a knock at his door. Looking up, he saw Lisa, the waitress from the diner, standing nervously in the doorway. "Commissioner Johnson?" she asked hesitantly. "Do you have a moment?" Marcus gestured for her to come in, offering her a seat. "Of course, what can I help you with?" Lisa hesitated, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "It's about Officer Harris," she admitted finally. "I've worked at the diner for years and, well, I've seen how he treats people. Not just customers, but staff too. He yells at us, makes rude comments, and sometimes even intimidates us into giving him free meals. We've complained before, but nothing ever changed." Marcus listened intently, his heart sinking as Lisa recounted her experiences. Each story painted a clearer picture of Harris's behavior, a pattern of abuse that extended far beyond isolated incidents. "Thank you for sharing this with me," Marcus said sincerely when she finished. "Your courage matters. Rest assured, I'll look into it further." Lisa nodded gratefully, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you, Commissioner. I just hope things get better." Once Lisa left, Marcus sat back in his chair, deep in thought. Harris's misconduct wasn't limited to public displays of prejudice. It seeped into private interactions as well, affecting those least equipped to defend themselves. If Marcus hoped to create lasting change, he needed to address these hidden injustices too. That evening, he updated Harris's file with Lisa's testimony, ensuring the information was documented thoroughly. Later that night, Marcus shared the day's developments with Maya over dinner. She listened attentively, her brow furrowed in concern. "Do you think Harris will actually change?" she asked after a moment. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, probably not. People like him rarely do unless forced, too. But that's why accountability is so important. Even if he doesn't change internally, his actions will be monitored closely. And if he slips up again," he trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air. Maya reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "Even if it's hard, even if people resist, you're making a difference. Don't forget that." Marcus smiled faintly, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thanks, Maya. I couldn't do this without you." The following day, Marcus decided to visit the diner once more, not officially, but as a concerned citizen. Dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, he blended in seamlessly with the lunchtime crowd. The diner buzzed with its usual energy, patrons chatting amiably over plates of food. As Marcus settled into a booth near the window, he scanned the room, noting the subtle shift in dynamics since his last visit. Gone was the palpable tension that had filled the space during Harris's tirade. In its place was a cautious optimism, as though people sensed that change was on the horizon. Lisa spotted Marcus almost immediately and hurried over to greet him. "Commissioner!" she exclaimed, her face lighting up with relief. "What brings you here today?" Marcus smiled warmly, keeping his tone light. "Just grabbing a bite to eat," he replied. "But I wanted to check in and see how things are going." Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "Things are better already. Word got around about your meeting yesterday. Officers have been acting more polite, tipping properly. It's like they're trying to prove something." Marcus chuckled, softly pleased to hear the news. "That's good to hear," he said. "Keep me updated if anything changes, okay?" Lisa promised she would, then scurried off to tend to other customers. As Marcus sipped his coffee, he allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. Progress might be slow, but it was happening, and that was worth celebrating. Across the diner, Harris sat sulking at the counter, nursing a cup of black coffee. Unlike his usual domineering posture, he seemed unusually subdued, his shoulders slumped and his gaze fixed firmly on the countertop. Every so often, he glanced furtively toward Marcus's table, clearly aware of his presence. When their eyes met briefly, Harris quickly looked away, his discomfort evident. For Marcus, the sight was both satisfying and sobering. Satisfying because Harris now understood the weight of accountability. Sobering because it highlighted the long road ahead. Reforming an entire department wouldn't happen overnight, but each small victory brought them closer to justice, and, as long as Marcus remained committed to the cause, he knew they could overcome any obstacle. By the time Marcus left the diner, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the town. He climbed into his car, reflecting on the day's events. Though challenges loomed large, he felt hopeful. Change was possible, not just within the police force but within the community as a whole. Together, they could build a future where everyone felt safe, respected, and valued. And for Marcus, that vision made every struggle worthwhile. The days following Marcus's visit to the diner marked a turning point in the small town. News of his reforms spread quickly, reaching not only the officers at the precinct, but also the residents who had long endured Harris's behavior. For years, people whispered about the officer's arrogance and cruelty, too afraid to speak up. But now, with Marcus leading the charge, they began to find their voices. Complaints poured into the precinct, some anonymous, others signed boldly, by citizens tired of being silenced. Each story added weight to the case against Harris, painting a damning portrait of an officer who abused his power and tarnished the badge he wore. Back at the precinct, Marcus worked tirelessly to ensure that his promises weren't just empty words. He collaborated with HR to design comprehensive training programs focused on cultural sensitivity, conflict resolution, and ethical conduct. Flyers announcing the sessions were posted throughout the station, accompanied by memos emphasizing their mandatory nature. Officers grumbled under their breath, some resentful of the extra work, but Marcus remained firm. "If we want respect from the community," he told anyone who complained, "we need to earn it." Among those forced to attend was Harris, whose demeanor grew increasingly bitter with each passing day. Once cocky and self-assured, he now slouched through the halls of the precinct like a man carrying a heavy burden. His colleagues avoided eye contact with him, unsure whether to pity or despise him. Some whispered behind his back, speculating about how long he'd last before being fired. Others kept their distance entirely, unwilling to associate with someone so clearly on thin ice. Meanwhile, Maya noticed subtle changes in her husband. Though Marcus always maintained a calm exterior, she could see the toll his new responsibilities were taking on him. Late nights spent drafting policies and reviewing files left him exhausted, dark circles forming under his eyes. Yet despite the stress, there was a spark in his gaze, a quiet determination that reassured Maya he was doing the right thing. She supported him in every way she could, preparing his favorite meals, listening patiently when he needed to vent, and reminding him of the difference he was making. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching TV, Maya turned to Marcus with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder if Harris knows why you're doing all this?" she asked softly. Marcus paused, considering her question. Probably not, he admitted after a moment. To him, I'm just another authority figure trying to clip his wings. But maybe someday he'll realize it's not personal. It's about protecting everyone. Maya nodded slowly, her mind drifting back to the diner encounter. I hope so, she said. But even if he doesn't change, at least you've made it clear that no one is above the rules. Marcus smiled faintly, squeezing her hand. That's all I can ask for. As weeks passed, Harris found himself increasingly isolated, not just within the department, but in the town itself. Word of his disciplinary actions had leaked, and while some sympathized with him, most viewed his situation as overdue justice. At the diner, servers no longer greeted him warmly. Instead, they treated him with cold professionalism, avoiding unnecessary conversation. Customers who once tolerated his presence now deliberately chose seats far away from him. Even the elderly, regulars who typically overlooked minor offenses, gave him wary glances whenever he entered. Harris tried to brush off the hostility, convincing himself it was temporary. They'll forget about it soon enough, he muttered to himself during lonely drives home. But deep down he knew better. The weight of accountability pressed down on him, a constant reminder of the consequences of his actions. For the first time in his career, Harris felt truly powerless, and it terrified him. Desperate to regain control, Harris attempted to curry favor with Marcus. He started arriving early to work, volunteering for menial tasks and offering superficial apologies to colleagues he had wronged. When Marcus called him into his office one afternoon, Harris seized the opportunity to plead his case. "Commissioner," he began nervously, twisting his cap in his hands, "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to learn. Please give me another chance." Marcus studied him carefully, searching for sincerity in Harris's face. What he saw was fear, rather, than remorse, an acknowledgement of consequences without genuine regret. Still, Marcus decided to offer guidance rather than outright dismissal. "Harris," he said evenly, "change starts with owning your actions. Saying sorry isn't enough. You have to prove it through your behavior. If you truly want a second chance, show me you're capable of growth." Harris nodded vigorously, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Commissioner. You won't regret this." As he left the office, however, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that Harris's promises were hollow. Time would tell whether the officer was sincere or simply biding his time until the spotlight faded. While Harris struggled to adapt, the community flourished under Marcus's leadership. Trust between citizens and law enforcement began to rebuild, brick by painstaking brick. Citizens' advisory boards held their first meetings, providing valuable feedback on policing strategies and fostering open dialogue. Officers assigned to patrol duty reported fewer complaints and more positive interactions, thanks in part to the newly implemented training programs. Slowly but surely, the town transformed into a place where mutual respect replaced suspicion. Even the diner became a symbol of progress. Where tension once dominated, camaraderie now reigned. Servers joked with customers, and laughter echoed through the space once again. Lisa, in particular, thrived under the improved atmosphere. No longer cowering under Harris's glare, she moved confidently between tables, her smile brighter than ever. When Marcus stopped by for lunch one afternoon, she greeted him warmly. "You've done wonders for this place, Commissioner," she said sincerely. "We owe you so much." Marcus chuckled modestly, shaking his head. "It's not me, it's everyone working together. All I did was set the stage." Lisa disagreed, insisting that his efforts had sparked real change. As she walked away to serve another table, Marcus allowed himself a rare moment of pride. Progress wasn't perfect, but it was undeniable, and that was something worth celebrating. Despite the overall improvement, challenges persisted. Not everyone welcomed reform, especially those who benefited from the status quo. A handful of veteran officers resented Marcus's initiatives, viewing them as unnecessary interference. They grumbled about political correctness and lamented the loss of old-school values, though their arguments lacked substance. Marcus listened patiently when approached with complaints, explaining the rationale behind his decisions, without raising his voice. Over time, many came around, realizing that change didn't mean abandoning tradition, it meant improving upon it. For Maya, witnessing her husband navigate these complexities filled her with admiration. She often reminded him of his strengths, urging him not to lose sight of the bigger picture. "You're planting seeds," she told him one evening. "It might take time for them to grow, but they will. And when they do, this town will be stronger than ever." Marcus appreciated her optimism, leaning on it during moments of doubt. Together, they faced each hurdle as a team, their bond strengthening with every challenge overcome. By the end of the month, Harris's transformation, or lack thereof, became apparent. While he adhered strictly to protocol during shifts, his underlying attitude remained unchanged. Co-workers noted his condescending remarks during briefings and his thinly veiled frustration when interacting with citizens. Though he avoided outright misconduct, his resentment simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. Marcus observed these patterns closely, documenting each instance meticulously. He understood that true reform required patience, but he also recognized when someone was beyond redemption. If Harris continued down this path, Marcus knew difficult decisions lay ahead. For now, though, he focused on maintaining momentum, ensuring that the department's culture shifted permanently. As he prepared for bed one night, Marcus reflected on the journey thus far. It hadn't been easy, nor was it finished, but every step forward brought them closer to justice, a future where fairness prevailed, and no one lived in fear of those sworn to protect them. With Maya by his side and the community rallying behind him, Marcus felt ready to tackle whatever came next. The weeks rolled on, and the small town continued to buzz with cautious optimism. Change was in the air, subtle but undeniable. People talked about it at grocery stores, schools, and community events. The diner, once a battleground of tension, became a symbol of hope. Yet, for all the progress Marcus had made, one shadow lingered: Officer Greg Harris. Despite his outward compliance, Harris's resentment simmered beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to resurface. Harris wasn't stupid. He knew how closely he was being watched. Every move he made was scrutinized, every word he spoke dissected. At first he tried to play along, nodding obediently during training sessions and apologizing to colleagues whenever necessary. But deep down, Harris seethed. He saw Marcus's reforms as a personal attack, a direct challenge to his authority and way of life. To him, the new policies weren't about fairness or accountability. They were about stripping away power from people like him and handing it to those who didn't deserve it. One chilly afternoon, as Harris patrolled the streets in his squad car, his frustration reached a boiling point. He'd just finished responding to a minor traffic incident involving a young black man who had accidentally run a stop sign. Though the infraction was harmless, Harris couldn't resist lecturing the driver, his tone dripping with condescension. "You need to be more careful," he snapped, ignoring the driver's polite apologies. "This isn't your neighborhood." The comment went unreported that day, but it didn't escape notice entirely. A bystander captured part of the interaction on their phone and posted it online. Within hours, screenshots of the video circulated through social media, reigniting conversations about Harris's behavior. Comments flooded in, criticizing his attitude and calling for further action against him. By evening, the clip had reached Marcus's inbox, accompanied by messages urging him to investigate. When Marcus reviewed the footage, his heart sank. Harris's words were unmistakable, a blatant violation of the very principles Marcus had been trying to instill. It wasn't just the remark itself, it was the underlying tone of superiority that disgusted him. Determined to address the issue immediately, Marcus summoned Harris to his office early the next morning. Harris arrived looking disheveled, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. When Marcus gestured for him to sit, Harris did so reluctantly, avoiding eye contact. "Do you know why I called you here?" Marcus asked, his voice calm but firm. Harris shook his head, feigning ignorance. "No, sir. Not really." Marcus slid a printout of the video transcript across the desk. "Take a look at this." As Harris scanned the document, his face turned pale. "Where did this come from?" he stammered, panic creeping into his voice. "That's not what happened. I mean, maybe I said something wrong, but it wasn't." "Like that?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression unwavering. "Let me ask you something, Harris. Do you think anyone believes you anymore? Because frankly, I don't." Harris opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus cut him off. "You've had chances to change, to prove you're capable of growth. Instead, you continue to act like nothing matters except your own ego. That stops now." Reaching into a folder, Marcus pulled out a formal suspension notice. "Effective immediately, you're suspended without pay pending further investigation. If we find sufficient evidence of misconduct, termination will follow." For a moment, Harris sat frozen, the weight of Marcus's words sinking in. Then, anger flared in his eyes. "You're ruining my career over one stupid comment?" he spat, his voice rising. "I've served this town for years. You're throwing all that away because of some kid with a camera?" Marcus stood up, his towering frame adding gravity to his response. "Your service means nothing if it's built on disrespect and prejudice. This isn't about one comment. It's about years of toxic behavior. And no, I'm not throwing anything away. You did that yourself." With that, Marcus dismissed him, leaving Harris to storm out of the office, slamming the door behind him. News of Harris's suspension spread quickly, sparking mixed reactions throughout the precinct. Some officers breathed sighs of relief, glad to see justice served. Others expressed concern, not for Harris but for the message his punishment sent. Would stricter rules discourage recruits from joining? Could the department function effectively under such intense scrutiny? These questions lingered in the background, fueling debates during coffee breaks and lunch hours. For Maya, hearing about Harris's downfall brought a mix of emotions. On one hand, she felt vindicated. Justice had finally caught up with the man who had treated her so cruelly. On the other hand, she worried about the toll the situation was taking on Marcus. Each victory came at a cost, and she could see the strain in his eyes. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, she broached the subject gently. "Are you okay?" she asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "I know this hasn't been easy for you." Marcus sighed deeply, wrapping an arm around her. "It's not supposed to be easy," he admitted. "Doing the right thing rarely is, but seeing the difference it makes for Lisa, for the diner patrons, for everyone, it reminds me why I started this journey in the first place." Maya smiled softly, squeezing his hand. "You're stronger than you realize, and you're not alone. We'll get through this together." Her words reassured him, grounding him when doubt threatened to creep in. Meanwhile, Harris spiraled into despair. Suspended and disgraced, he spent his days drinking cheap beer and replaying the confrontation with Marcus in his mind. His bitterness festered, morphing into paranoia. He convinced himself that Marcus had targeted him personally, that the commissioner held a grudge against him for reasons beyond professional conduct. The truth, that his actions had earned his fate, escaped him entirely. One night, unable to contain his rage, Harris decided to take matters into his own hands. Armed with half-formed plans and fueled by alcohol, he drove to the diner. The place was nearly empty, save for a few late-night customers nursing cups of coffee. Spotting Lisa behind the counter, Harris approached her with a swagger that masked his instability. "You think you're safe now?" he sneered, leaning menacingly over the counter. "Just because your boyfriend, the commissioner, has it out for me?" Lisa froze, fear gripping her chest. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" It was Marcus, who happened to be grabbing a late-night snack after finishing paperwork. His presence transformed the room instantly, the atmosphere shifting from danger to safety. Harris spun around, his face contorted with fury. "Of course you'd show up," he spat, "always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Marcus stepped closer, his gaze steady. "Leave. Now. Or I'll have you arrested for harassment." For a moment, Harris hesitated, weighing his options. Finally, he backed down, muttering curses under his breath as he stormed out of the diner. Later, That night, Marcus ensured Lisa filed a report documenting the incident. He promised her that Harris wouldn't get away with intimidating her or anyone else ever again. As he left the diner, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, the road ahead would remain challenging, but as long as he stood firm, protecting those who needed it most, the fight would always be worth it. In the weeks that followed, Harris's suspension turned into termination. The department cited repeated violations of policy and conduct standards, citing both recent incidents and past complaints. While some sympathized with his plight, many celebrated the decision, viewing it as a step toward lasting change. For Marcus, it marked a pivotal moment, a testament to the power of accountability. At home, Maya celebrated quietly with Marcus, pouring them each a glass of wine. "To progress," she toasted, raising her glass. Marcus clinked his against hers, smiling warmly. "And to justice," he added. Together, they looked toward the future, knowing the work was far from over, but confident they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The termination of Officer Greg Harris marked a turning point, not only for the police department but also for the entire town. Word of his dismissal spread like wildfire, sparking conversations in homes, workplaces, and community gatherings. Some residents cheered openly, relieved to see someone they viewed as a bully finally held accountable. Others remained cautious, wondering if this was just a temporary fix or the beginning of real, lasting change. For Marcus, it was both a victory and a reminder of the work still ahead. He knew that firing one officer wouldn't solve systemic issues overnight, but it sent a powerful message. No one was above accountability. In the days following Harris's departure, the precinct felt different. Officers who had once tiptoed around him now moved with renewed energy, their steps lighter, their interactions warmer. Training sessions became more engaging, with participants actively contributing ideas on how to improve relations with the community. Even the veteran officers who had initially resisted reform began to soften, realizing that Marcus wasn't out to punish them. He genuinely wanted to help them grow. Slowly but surely, the culture within the department shifted from fear and resentment to collaboration and trust. Meanwhile, life at the diner returned to normal, or rather, a new kind of normal. Servers greeted customers warmly, free from the anxiety that Harris's presence had once caused. Lisa, in particular, thrived under the improved atmosphere. Her confidence grew, and she took pride in her work, knowing that her voice mattered. When Marcus stopped by for breakfast one morning, she greeted him with a bright smile. "Commissioner," she said cheerfully, "I hope you're hungry today. I've got something special for you." Marcus chuckled, settling into his usual booth near the window. "Special sounds good," he replied. As Lisa bustled off to prepare his meal, Marcus glanced around the room, taking in the lively chatter and laughter. This was what he had been fighting for, a place where people felt safe and respected, regardless of who they were or where they came from. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that meant everything. Back at home, Maya noticed subtle changes in Marcus too. The stress lines etched into his face seemed less pronounced, and his shoulders carried less weight. Though the challenges of leadership still weighed on him, there was a newfound lightness in his demeanor, a quiet satisfaction that came from seeing tangible results. One evening, as they sat together on the couch reviewing old case files, Maya leaned over and kissed him lightly on the cheek. "You know," she said softly, "you've done more than just clean up the department. You've given people hope." Marcus smiled faintly, closing the folder in his lap. "Hope is important," he agreed. "But it's not enough on its own. We need action, consistency, and commitment. That's how we make sure things don't slip back to the way they were." Maya nodded thoughtfully, her hand resting gently on his arm. "And that's why you're so good at this, because you won't let them slip." Their conversation turned reflective, each sharing thoughts about the journey so far. Maya admitted that while she was proud of Marcus, she sometimes worried about the toll it took on him emotionally. "It's hard being the person everyone looks to for answers," she confessed. "I just want you to remember, that it's okay to lean on me when you need to. Marcus squeezed her hand gratefully, his heart swelling with love and appreciation. I couldn't do any of this without you, he said honestly. You keep me grounded when I feel like I'm losing my way. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Marcus's reforms continued to spread. Citizens' advisory boards flourished, providing valuable feedback that shaped department policies. Community events, once sparsely attended due to mistrust, drew large crowds eager to engage with law enforcement. Officers assigned to patrol duty reported fewer complaints and more positive interactions, thanks in part to the training programs Marcus had championed. Even the local news highlighted the town's transformation, praising Marcus's leadership and calling it a model for other communities to follow. Yet amidst the accolades, Marcus remained humble. He understood that true success wasn't measured by headlines or public praise. It was reflected in the everyday lives of the people he served. Whether it was a child waving enthusiastically at a passing patrol car, or an elderly woman thanking an officer for helping her carry groceries, these small moments reminded him why the struggle was worth it. One afternoon, during a routine walk through the park, Marcus encountered a familiar face, the young black man who had been pulled over by Harris months earlier. The driver approached him hesitantly, extending a hand. "Commissioner Johnson?" he asked nervously. Marcus smiled warmly, shaking the man's hand. "That's me. How can I help you?" "I just wanted to say thank you," the man replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "What you did, holding Harris accountable, it meant a lot. Not just to me, but to everyone who's ever felt powerless because of people like him." Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat, overwhelmed by the gratitude in the man's eyes. "It's my job," he said simply, "and I'll keep doing it as long as I'm needed." The encounter stayed with Marcus long after he left the park. It reinforced his belief that every action mattered, that even the smallest effort could inspire hope and drive change. That night, he shared the story with Maya, who listened intently, her eyes glistening with pride. "See?" she said softly. "This is why you're here, to remind people that justice isn't just a word, it's something we create together." Despite the progress, Marcus knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. There would be setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that change wasn't linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and often frustrating. What mattered most was perseverance. Each victory, no matter how small, brought them closer to a future where fairness prevailed and no one lived in fear of those sworn to protect them. To celebrate the milestones achieved, Marcus organized a town hall meeting designed to foster open dialogue between citizens and law enforcement. The event drew a diverse crowd, filling the community center to capacity. Residents spoke candidly about their experiences, sharing stories of both triumphs and ongoing struggles. Officers listened attentively, taking notes and promising to address concerns raised. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere buzzed with optimism, a testament to the power of communication and understanding. As Marcus stood at the podium delivering closing remarks, he scanned the room, his gaze lingering on familiar faces. Maya sat near the front, beaming with pride. Lisa waved enthusiastically from the back, surrounded by fellow diner staff. And scattered throughout the audience were countless others whose lives had been touched by the changes unfolding in their town. "We've come a long way," Marcus began, his voice steady yet heartfelt. "But our journey isn't over. Together we can build a future rooted in respect, trust, and equality. Let's keep moving forward. Together." Applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and unity. As Marcus stepped down from the stage, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Yes, there would still be challenges. Yes, the fight for justice would continue. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus allowed himself to believe, not just in the possibility of change, but in its inevitability. Later that night, as he and Maya strolled home under a starlit sky, Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You know what?" he said quietly. "I think we're going to be okay." Maya tilted her head up, smiling softly. We already are, she replied. And for the first time in months, Marcus truly believed it.